I never imagined that clearing snow from my driveway at 7 in the morning would land me in court, facing a restraining order filed by the most vindictive woman I had ever met. My name is David Richardson, and I have lived in the Maple Ridge subdivision in Bloomington, Minnesota, for 6 years. The neighborhood is quiet, pleasant, and filled with modest two-story homes that line streets named after trees. Everything was perfectly normal until Patricia Hendricks became president of the Homeowners Association 2 years ago. Patricia was exactly what you would picture when someone says the word Karren. She was 48 years old with a blonde bob haircut that she kept aggressively styled, always wore athleisure outfits despite never actually exercising, and had a voice that could cut through concrete when she was upset. She lived 3 houses down from me in a home she shared with her husband Greg, a quiet man who worked in IT and seemed to have perfected the art of nodding and agreeing to avoid conflict. Patricia had made it her personal mission to enforce every single HOA rule with militant precision, and she had created several new ones that seemed designed specifically to make our lives miserable. The whole mess started on a Tuesday morning in January. Minnesota winters are brutal, and we had gotten nearly 14 inches of snow overnight. I woke up at 6:30, made myself coffee, and looked out my kitchen window at the white blanket covering everything. My driveway was completely buried, and I knew I needed to clear it before heading to work at the engineering firm downtown. I worked as a mechanical engineer, and we had an important client meeting scheduled for 9 that I could not miss. At exactly 7 o'clock, I wheeled my snow blower out of the garage. It was a Toro Power Max model that I had purchased 3 years ago, a reliable machine that made quick work of heavy snowfall. The engine roared to life when I pulled the starter cord, and I began methodically clearing my driveway in neat passes. The snow blower was not particularly loud compared to other models, but it did make the distinctive rumbling sound that all gas-powered equipment makes. I was maybe 10 minutes into the job when my phone started buzzing in my pocket. I ignored it and kept working. The snow was wet and heavy, the kind that makes your back ache if you try to shovel it by hand. My phone buzzed again, and again. After the 5th buzz in 2 minutes, I turned off the snow blower to check what was happening. I had 7 text messages from Patricia Hendricks. The first one read, "The noise ordinance prohibits outdoor power equipment before 8 a.m. on weekdays." The second, "You are in violation of HOA Rules Article 7, Section 3. The third, "Turn off your equipment immediately." The 4th through 7th were variations of the same demand, each one more insistent than the last. I felt my jaw tighten as I read them. I had lived here for 6 years and had used my snow blower countless times in the early morning without a single complaint from anyone. I texted back a simple response. "I have to get to work. We'll be done in 20 minutes. Her reply came instantly. "That is unacceptable. You are disturbing the peace." I am documenting this violation. I shoved my phone back in my pocket and restarted the snow blower. I had a driveway to clear and a meeting to get to. Patricia could document whatever she wanted. I finished the job in another 15 minutes, cleared the sidewalk in front of my house as required by city ordinance, and put the snow blower back in my garage. As I was heading inside to shower and change for work, I noticed Patricia standing in her driveway wearing a puffy pink coat and holding her phone up, clearly recording me. I waved at her sarcastically and went inside. This was not the first time Patricia had targeted me with petty complaints. 6 months earlier, she had sent me a violation notice because my grass was supposedly 3.5 inches tall, when the HOA rules stated it must not exceed 3 inches. I had measured it myself with a ruler, and found it was exactly 2¾ inches. When I challenged her measurement, she claimed her measurement was official and mine was not. The whole thing was absurd, but I had mowed my lawn again just to make her go away. That evening when I got home from work, there was an envelope taped to my front door. Inside was an official HOA violation notice, printed on Patricia's custom letterhead, that she had designed to look as official as possible. The notice stated that I had violated the noise ordinance and HOA rules by operating power equipment before 8 in the morning, and I was being fined $250. The notice also stated that future violations would result in escalating fines and potential legal action. I crumpled the paper and tossed it on my kitchen counter. $250 for clearing snow so I could get to work. I considered my options. I could pay the ridiculous fine and let Patricia think she could bully me, or I could fight it. I had copies of the HOA bylaws and the city noise ordinances. I spent that evening reading through every relevant section. The city of Bloomington did have a noise ordinance, but it exempted snow removal equipment during winter storm events. The snowfall we had received qualified as a winter storm event by any reasonable definition. Furthermore, the HOA rules stated that homeowners must maintain clear driveways and sidewalks within 24 hours of snowfall for safety reasons. Patricia was trying to fine me for following one rule while claiming I violated another. The hypocrisy was stunning. I drafted a formal response letter citing the specific ordinances and HOA rules that supported my position. I emailed it to the HOA board, which consisted of Patricia as president, a retired teacher named Malcolm Webster as vice president, and a young woman named Jennifer Torres as secretary. I also requested a formal hearing to dispute the fine, which was my right under the HOA bylaws. Malcolm responded the next day with a brief email saying the hearing would be scheduled within 2 weeks. Jennifer sent a separate email apologizing for the situation and noting that she personally thought the fine was unreasonable. Patricia did not respond at all, which I took as a bad sign. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday evening at 7 in the community clubhouse, a small building near the subdivision entrance that was used for HOA meetings and occasional resident gatherings. I arrived 10 minutes early with printed copies of all relevant ordinances, photographs of my snow blower with decibel ratings from the manufacturer, and a log I had started keeping of every time Patricia had harassed me over minor issues. Patricia was already there, sitting at a folding table with Malcolm and Jennifer. She had dressed in a navy blazer and white blouse, like she was conducting a board meeting at a Fortune 500 company instead of a neighborhood HOA hearing. Malcolm looked uncomfortable, and Jennifer gave me a sympathetic smile as I sat down in the chair facing them. Patricia called the meeting to order with unnecessary formality. She read the violation notice aloud, then asked if I had anything to say in my defense. I presented my case calmly and methodically. I cited the city ordinance exempting snow removal during winter storms. I cited the HOA rule requiring clear driveways. I pointed out the logical impossibility of following both rules if I could not use equipment before 8 in the morning when I had to leave for work at 8:15. Malcolm nodded along as I spoke. Jennifer took notes. Patricia sat with her arms crossed, her expression growing more pinched with every point I made. When I finished, Patricia launched into a speech about how rules were rules and exceptions could not be made for individual convenience. She claimed that I could have woken up earlier to clear my driveway after 8, which made no sense given that I had to leave for work. She said that other residents had complained about the noise, though she refused to provide any names or evidence of these complaints. Malcolm cleared his throat. Patricia, I think David makes a valid point about the conflict between the noise rule and the driveway clearing requirement, and the city ordinance does seem to allow snow removal equipment during storms. Patricia's face flushed red. The HOA rules supersede city ordinances within our community. That's actually not true, I said, keeping my voice level. City and state laws always supersede HOA rules. The HOA can make rules that are more restrictive than city law, but those rules cannot contradict or prevent compliance with actual laws. Jennifer spoke up quietly. I think we should rescind the fine. David has made a strong case, and I do not think we want to get into a legal dispute over something like this. Patricia turned her glare on Jennifer. We need to maintain order and standards in this community. If we allow one person to break the rules, everyone will think they can do whatever they want. The debate continued for another 20 minutes. Malcolm and Jennifer both seemed inclined to dismiss the fine, but Patricia was immovable. Finally, Malcolm suggested they take a vote. Jennifer voted to rescind the fine. Malcolm voted to rescind the fine. Patricia voted to uphold it. The fine was dismissed 2-1. I should have felt relieved, but Patricia's expression as I left the clubhouse told me this was not over. She looked at me with pure venom, like I had personally insulted her by daring to challenge her authority. I recognized that look. I had seen it before from people who took any disagreement as a personal attack. Over the next few weeks, Patricia escalated her campaign of harassment. I received violation notices for parking my car 6 inches over the edge of my driveway, for leaving my garbage cans visible from the street 15 minutes past the allowed time, and for having a holiday wreath on my door 3 days after she had decided the holiday season was officially over. Each violation came with threatened fines. I challenged every single one, providing photographic evidence and citing rules that proved the violations were either fabricated or absurdly petty. Malcolm and Jennifer consistently voted to dismiss the violations, but the pattern was clear. Patricia was abusing her position to target me specifically. Other neighbors started mentioning that they had noticed the harassment. My next-door neighbor, Robert Chen, told me that Patricia had tried to cite him for having the wrong shade of brown mulch in his flower beds, but had backed off when he threatened to consult an attorney. Then we got another major snowstorm in early February. This one dropped 16 inches overnight, and the Weather Service had issued a winter storm warning. I knew exactly what would happen if I used my snow blower early in the morning, but I had no choice. I had to clear my driveway, and I had to get to work. At 7 o'clock on that Friday morning, I started up my snow blower. I had not even finished the first pass when Patricia came storming out of her house. She was still in her bathrobe and slippers, her hair uncombed, her face twisted in rage. She marched across the snow-covered street directly toward me, holding her phone up to record. "Turn that off right now," she screamed over the engine noise. I ignored her and continued working. She stepped directly in front of the snow blower, forcing me to stop or risk hitting her with it. "I killed the engine. Are you out of your mind?" I said. "You just stepped in front of a running snow blower. You are violating the noise ordinance again. I warned you about this. Patricia, there is a winter storm warning. The city ordinance specifically allows snow removal equipment during winter storms. We have been through this already. I do not care about your excuses. You are deliberately disturbing my peace. This is harassment." I felt my temper rising but forced myself to stay calm. "You are the one harassing me. You have been filing false violations against me for weeks. Now please get out of my way so I can finish clearing my driveway. I am calling the police." She was shrieking now, loud enough that I saw curtains moving in nearby windows as neighbors looked out to see what was happening. "Go ahead and call them," I said. "I am not doing anything illegal." She stood there in the middle of my driveway for another 30 seconds, recording me on her phone, then turned and trudged back to her house through the deep snow. I restarted the snow blower and finished the job. As I was putting the equipment away, a Bloomington police cruiser pulled up in front of my house. A young officer stepped out, looking slightly apologetic. "Good morning, sir. I received a noise complaint. Can I ask what is going on?" I explained the situation calmly. I showed him the snow blower, explained about the winter storm warning, and mentioned the city ordinance exemption. He nodded and took notes. "Yeah, snow removal equipment is allowed during winter weather events," he said. "Who made the complaint?" "Patricia Hendricks. She is the HOA president." "She lives 3 doors down," the officer sighed. "Is this an ongoing dispute?" "She has been harassing me for months with false HOA violations. I think she is retaliating because I successfully challenged some of her fines." He took down both of our information and said he would speak with Patricia. I went inside to get ready for work, watching through my window as the officer walked to Patricia's house. He was there for maybe 5 minutes before returning to his cruiser and leaving. I thought that would be the end of it. A police officer had confirmed that I was not violating any laws. Surely even Patricia would back off now. I was wrong. 3 days later, I was served with legal papers at my home. A process server handed me an envelope containing a petition for a restraining order. Patricia Hendricks was seeking a harassment restraining order against me, claiming that I had engaged in a pattern of harassing behavior, including deliberately making excessive noise, verbally threatening her, and causing her severe emotional distress. I stood in my doorway reading the petition in disbelief. Every single allegation was either a complete fabrication or a twisted distortion of reality. She claimed I had threatened her during our confrontation in my driveway, which was an outright lie. She claimed I deliberately ran my snow blower at excessive volume to disturb her specifically, which was absurd. She claimed I had engaged in a campaign of intimidation that had left her afraid in her own home. The hearing was scheduled for the following week at the Hennepin County District Court in downtown Minneapolis. I immediately called an attorney. I had a friend from college named Thomas Brenner who practiced civil litigation in Minneapolis, and he had handled some HOA disputes before. I explained the entire situation to him over the phone. "This is absolutely ridiculous," Thomas said after hearing the story, "but you need to take it seriously. Even a frivolous restraining order can be a major problem if a judge grants it. You need to put together all your evidence and documentation." I spent the weekend compiling everything. I had all the violation notices Patricia had sent me. I had copies of all my response letters. I had the emails from the HOA board meetings. I had photographs, timestamps, and a detailed timeline of every interaction. Thomas reviewed everything and prepared a written response to the petition. The hearing was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. I took the day off work and met Thomas at the courthouse an hour early. We went through the evidence one more time, and he coached me on how to testify. The key was to stay calm, stick to facts, and not let Patricia provoke me into an emotional response. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, a simple room with wooden benches and a judge's bench at the front. Patricia arrived with her attorney, a woman named Deanne Carlson who looked to be in her mid-50s with severe features and an expensive suit. Patricia was dressed like she was going to church, wearing a modest dress and cardigan, her hair perfectly styled. She was clearly playing the part of the frightened victim. The judge was a man named Robert Matthews, probably in his early 60s with gray hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. He called the case to order and asked Attorney Carlson to present her case. Deanne Carlson stood and launched into a dramatic presentation. She described Patricia as a devoted community leader who had been targeted by a hostile neighbor. She claimed I had repeatedly violated community rules and had become verbally aggressive when confronted. She presented the petition's allegations as established facts, painting me as an unstable person who had fixated on her client. Then, Patricia took the stand to testify. Under Carlson's questioning, she described how frightened she had been when I refused to turn off my snow blower. She claimed I had raised my voice and used threatening language. She said she had been having trouble sleeping because she was afraid I might do something violent. She actually teared up while testifying, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. It was a masterful performance, and I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach as I watched the judge taking notes. If he believed her act, I could end up with a restraining order on my record based on complete lies. Thomas Cross examined her methodically. He asked about the specific HOA violations she had filed against me. He asked her to explain the conflict between the noise ordinance and the snow removal requirement. He asked if she had filed similar violations against any other residents. With each question, Patricia's answers became more defensive and less consistent. "You testified that Mr. Richardson threatened you, correct?" Thomas asked. "Yes, he was very aggressive." "What specifically did he say that you considered a threat?" Patricia hesitated. "He told me to get out of his way in a very threatening tone." "Did he use any profanity?" "No, but his tone was threatening." "Did he make any statement about harming you?" "Not directly, but the implication was clear." "So he said the words 'get out of my way' and you interpreted that as a threat?" "Yes, given the context and his aggressive demeanor." Thomas pulled out his phone. "Your Honor, I have a video recording that was posted to the Maple Ridge HOA Facebook page on the day in question." The petitioner posted this video herself. "I would like to play it for the court." Judge Matthews allowed it. Thomas connected his phone to the courtroom's display system, and the video played. It showed exactly what had happened that morning. Patricia had recorded the entire confrontation, and her own video completely contradicted her testimony. You could clearly hear our entire exchange, and my voice was calm and measured throughout. There was no threat, no aggression, nothing that could reasonably be interpreted as harassment. Patricia's face went pale as the video played. Attorney Carlson looked like she had swallowed something bitter. When the video ended, Thomas continued his cross-examination. "Miss Hendricks, this is the video you yourself posted to social media, correct?" "Yes," she said quietly. "And we just heard you say on that video that you were calling the police, correct?" "Yes." "And did the police respond?" "Yes." "And did they cite Mr. Richardson for any violation?" "No." "Did they tell you that he was allowed to use snow removal equipment during a winter storm?" Patricia did not answer immediately. Judge Matthews prompted her to respond. "They said there was an exemption," she finally admitted. Thomas then entered into evidence all the frivolous violation notices Patricia had filed against me, along with the HOA board meeting minutes showing that every violation had been dismissed. He showed the pattern of harassment that Patricia had engaged in against me, making it clear who the actual harasser was in this situation. When it was my turn to testify, I simply told the truth. I explained my work schedule, the necessity of clearing my driveway early, and the city ordinance that allowed it. I described Patricia's escalating harassment and my attempts to resolve the issues through proper channels. I remained calm and factual throughout. Judge Matthews asked me directly, Have you at any time threatened Miss Hendricks or engaged in any behavior intended to harass or intimidate her? No, Your Honor. I have only tried to maintain my property and go about my normal life. Every interaction I've had with Miss Hendricks has been in response to violations she filed against me, not the other way around. After both sides had presented their evidence, Judge Matthews took a short recess to review the materials. When he returned to the bench, his expression was stern. I have reviewed all the evidence and testimony in this matter, he began. It is clear to me that this petition is entirely without merit. The video evidence directly contradicts the petitioner's testimony about the alleged threat. The documentation shows a pattern of harassment by the petitioner against the respondent, not the reverse. The respondent was engaged in lawful snow removal activity that is explicitly permitted by city ordinance. He turned his attention to Patricia. Miss Hendricks, filing a false restraining order petition is a serious matter. You have wasted this court's time and resources with allegations that your own evidence proves are false. Then he looked at Attorney Carlson, and his expression hardened. Attorney Carlson, did you review the video evidence before filing this petition? Deanne Carlson stood. Your Honor, I relied on my client's representation of the facts. That is not what I asked you. Did you watch the video that your client posted to social media before filing a petition claiming that she was threatened? There was a long pause. I did not, Your Honor. Judge Matthews shook his head. You filed a petition for a restraining order containing specific factual allegations without conducting even the most basic investigation to verify those allegations. Your client posted video evidence to a public Facebook page that directly contradicts the claims in the petition you filed. This represents a failure to conduct reasonable inquiry before filing, which violates Rule 11 of the Minnesota Rules of Civil Procedure. He shuffled through some papers on his bench. The petition for a restraining order is denied in its entirety. Furthermore, I am sanctioning Attorney Carlson pursuant to Rule 11. You will be required to pay the respondent's reasonable attorney fees incurred in defending against this frivolous petition. You will also be required to complete 6 hours of continuing legal education on the ethical obligations of attorneys in civil proceedings. Deanne Carlson's face went white. Sanctions were serious business for an attorney. This would go on her record and could affect her reputation and practice. Judge Matthews was not finished. Miss Hendricks, I am also ordering you to pay the respondent's court costs. Additionally, I am issuing a warning that if you continue to file frivolous complaints or legal actions against Mr. Richardson, you may face further sanctions including a restraining order against you. Do you understand? Patricia nodded, looking stunned and humiliated. This court is adjourned. I walked out of the courtroom feeling like a massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Thomas was grinning. That went even better than I hoped. Matthews does not mess around with frivolous filings. You should get a court order in a few days specifying the amount of fees that Carlson has to pay. We went to a nearby coffee shop to discuss next steps. Thomas calculated his fees for the case, which came to around $3,500, including preparation time and the court appearance. Deanne Carlson would be required to pay that amount, which meant this whole fiasco would not cost me anything except the time and stress. What about the HOA situation? I asked. Patricia is still the president. She is still going to be a problem. Thomas thought for a moment. You could sue the HOA for harassment. You have solid documentation of a pattern of abuse. Or you could try to work within the HOA structure to remove her from the board. Check your bylaws for recall procedures. I went home and read through the HOA bylaws that evening. There was a provision allowing for recall of board members with a petition signed by at least 30% of homeowners, followed by a recall vote at a special meeting. Our subdivision had 82 homes, which meant I needed signatures from at least 25 homeowners to trigger a recall vote. I decided to start talking to my neighbors. Robert Chen signed immediately and offered to help collect more signatures. He had his own grievances with Patricia's petty enforcement actions. A couple named Steve and Linda Morrison, who lived across the street, also signed eagerly. Linda told me about how Patricia had tried to fine them for painting their front door a shade of red that was supposedly not on the approved color list, even though it was identical to the color shown in the HOA guidelines. Over the next week, I collected signatures from 32 homeowners. Many people were fed up with Patricia's behavior, but had been afraid to speak up individually. The restraining order fiasco had become neighborhood gossip, and sentiment had turned sharply against her. Several people mentioned that they had only voted for Patricia as HOA president because she ran unopposed, and they regretted it now. I submitted the recall petition to Malcolm Webster as vice president. He was required to schedule a special meeting within 30 days. He looked relieved when I handed him the petition with all the signatures. "I have been wanting to do something about Patricia for months," he confided, "but I did not think I had enough support. She has been making the HOA board meetings miserable. Jennifer and I have been outvoted on almost everything because Patricia treats every decision like a personal crusade." The special meeting was scheduled for a Thursday evening 3 weeks later. The turnout was enormous. The small clubhouse was packed with at least 60 residents, far more than had ever attended a regular HOA meeting. Patricia sat at the board table looking defiant, her arms crossed, her expression hard. Malcolm called the meeting to order and explained the recall procedure. I was given 15 minutes to present the case for recall. I had prepared a presentation with printed handouts showing every frivolous violation Patricia had filed, not just against me but against numerous residents. I showed the pattern of abuse and overreach. I explained how she had wasted HOA resources on personal vendettas. I mentioned the restraining order case and the judge's findings. Several other residents spoke up with their own stories of harassment. Steve Morrison talked about the door color dispute. A woman named Angela Peters described how Patricia had threatened to fine her for having a vegetable garden in her backyard because it supposedly violated aesthetic standards, even though the backyard was not visible from the street and the bylaws said nothing about vegetable gardens. An elderly man named Harold Kim explained how Patricia had cited him for having weeds in his lawn when what she had identified as weeds were actually a native wildflower species he was cultivating. Patricia was given 15 minutes to defend herself. She stood and launched into a speech about maintaining standards and property values. She claimed that strict enforcement was necessary to prevent the neighborhood from declining. She insisted that she had always acted in the best interests of the community. She never once acknowledged that any of her actions might have been wrong or excessive. Then came the vote. Malcolm distributed paper ballots to all homeowners present. Each household got one vote on whether to recall Patricia as HOA president. The votes were counted publicly, with Malcolm and Jennifer tallying while several residents observed to ensure transparency. The final count was 56 votes in favor of recall and 8 votes against. Patricia had been overwhelmingly removed from her position. She stood up, her face bright red, and pointed at me. "This is all because of you. You have turned everyone against me. You are destroying this community." Several people in the crowd groaned or rolled their eyes. Robert Chen called out, "You did this to yourself, Patricia." She grabbed her papers and purse and stormed out of the clubhouse, slamming the door behind her. Her husband, Greg, who had been sitting quietly in the back, gave everyone an apologetic look and followed her out. Malcolm was elected as the new HOA president by acclamation. He immediately announced that his first priority would be to review all HOA rules and eliminate unnecessary or overly restrictive provisions. He also promised that enforcement would focus on actual issues affecting property values and safety, not petty aesthetic complaints. The atmosphere in the neighborhood changed almost immediately. Malcolm sent out an email apologizing for the previous administration's overreach and promising a more reasonable approach. He rescinded several of Patricia's more ridiculous rules, including the one about garbage cans needing to be invisible from the street within 2 hours of collection, which had been nearly impossible to comply with if you were at work all day. I received the court order specifying that Diane Carlson owed $3,500 in attorney fees about a week after the recall meeting. Thomas filed the order with the court clerk, and we waited for payment. Carlson dragged her feet for a few weeks, but eventually paid when Thomas threatened to pursue additional sanctions for non-compliance. Patricia and Greg kept to themselves after the recall. I would occasionally see Patricia outside getting her mail or leaving in her car, but she never made eye contact and never spoke to me. The harassment stopped completely. No more violation notices, no more complaints, no more confrontations. Several months passed peacefully. Winter gave way to spring, and I enjoyed being able to maintain my property without constant scrutiny and threats. The neighborhood felt friendlier and more relaxed. Malcolm organized a community barbecue in May that was actually fun. Unlike the stiff and formal events Patricia had organized where she spent the entire time lecturing people about rule compliance. Then in late June, I noticed "For Sale" sign appear in Patricia's yard. She and Greg were moving. Robert Chen told me he had heard through the neighborhood grapevine that they were relocating to a condo in Eden Prairie, a nearby suburb. Apparently, Patricia wanted a place with a professional management company where she would not have to deal with an HOA board. "Good riddance," Robert said. "Maybe she will be happier somewhere she can just pay her fees and not have to interact with neighbors." I felt a sense of relief seeing that sign. Patricia had made my life miserable for months, and while I was glad the situation had been resolved, I would be even happier when she was gone entirely, and there was zero chance of future conflict. The house sold quickly. A young couple with 2 small children moved in, and they were friendly and pleasant. The husband, whose name was Marcus, came over to introduce himself the day they moved in. We talked for a while about the neighborhood, and I gave him a brief, diplomatic version of the HOA situation, mentioning that there had been some issues with overly strict enforcement, but that things were much better now under new leadership. Life returned to normal. I continued working at my engineering firm, maintained my property, and enjoyed living in a neighborhood that was no longer governed by petty tyranny. Malcolm proved to be an excellent HOA president, handling actual issues promptly while not sweating the small stuff. The neighborhood thrived under his reasonable leadership. I never saw or heard from Patricia Hendricks again after she moved. Diane Carlson's law firm removed her name from their website's list of attorneys a few months later, and I heard from Thomas that she had left the firm, possibly pushed out due to the embarrassment of being sanctioned. I did not know what happened to her after that, and I did not particularly care. The whole experience taught me several valuable lessons. First, that documentation is everything in any dispute. Without my meticulous records of every violation notice, every email and every interaction, I would not have been able to defend myself effectively. Second, that standing up to bullies is worth it, even when it is stressful and costly in the short term. Patricia had been counting on people being too intimidated or too tired to fight back, and when someone finally did, her whole house of cards collapsed. Third, that community matters. I could not have recalled Patricia without the support of dozens of neighbors who were equally fed up with her behavior. I also gained a healthy appreciation for the importance of HOA governance. A homeowners association can make life pleasant or miserable depending on who is in charge and how they wield their authority. Rules and regulations are necessary for maintaining a community, but they need to be enforced reasonably and proportionally. Patricia had used her position to feed her need for control and to punish people who disagreed with her, turning the HOA into a weapon instead of a tool for community betterment. Looking back on those months of harassment and stress, I was grateful for how things turned out. Yes, I had to deal with the anxiety of being served with a restraining order petition based on lies. Yes, I had to spend time and energy fighting back against frivolous violations. But in the end, justice prevailed. The judge saw through Patricia's lies and sanctioned her attorney for filing a baseless petition. The neighborhood rallied together to remove a toxic leader from power. And I learned that I was stronger and more resilient than I had known. The snow blower incident that started it all seemed almost comical in retrospect. Patricia had been so enraged by the simple act of me clearing snow from my driveway that she escalated to legal action. And in doing so, she exposed herself and destroyed her own position in the community. If she had just left me alone, she might still be HOA president, making everyone's lives slightly worse with her petty enforcement. Instead, her vindictiveness led to her downfall. Winter came around again, and when the first major snowstorm hit in December, I wheeled out my trusty Toro snow blower at 7 in the morning without a second thought. The engine roared to life, and I cleared my driveway in peaceful silence, well, as peaceful as operating a gas-powered snow blower can be. No violation notices appeared on my door. No one came screaming across the street to confront me. No police were called. It was just a normal morning in a normal neighborhood, the way it should have been all along. Marcus, my new neighbor in Patricia's old house, was also out clearing his driveway. He was using a shovel, working methodically through the heavy snow. I finished my driveway and then walked over to him. "Want me to do yours?" I offered, gesturing to my snow blower. "This thing makes quick work of it." His face lit up. "That would be amazing, thank you." I cleared his driveway in about 10 minutes and he thanked me profusely. It felt good to help a neighbor without worrying about HOA violations or retaliation, or someone twisting a kind gesture into some kind of rule infraction. This was what community was supposed to be about. As I put my snow blower away that morning, I reflected on how much had changed in 1 year. Last winter, I had been under constant attack from a vindictive HOA president who seemed to see me as her personal enemy. This winter, I was living peacefully in a well-managed community with reasonable leadership and friendly neighbors. The difference was night and day. I went inside, made myself hot coffee and got ready for work. It was just another Tuesday morning, unremarkable and routine. And that was exactly how I liked it. No drama, no conflict, no restraining orders. Just normal life in a normal neighborhood in Bloomington, Minnesota. The legal bills had been paid, not by me, but by the attorney who had failed to do her due diligence. The HOA was functioning properly under competent leadership. Patricia was gone, presumably making someone else's life difficult in her new condo community, though I hoped she had learned something from the experience and changed her ways. I doubted it, but it was not my problem anymore. I arrived at work that day and threw myself into a complex mechanical design problem for a client. Engineering was straightforward in a way that human conflicts were not. There were right answers and wrong answers, calculations that either worked or did not, designs that either met specifications or failed. No personality conflicts, no petty power plays, just math and physics and problem solving. My colleague Jennifer, not to be confused with Jennifer Torres from the HOA board, asked me how I was doing. "You seem a lot more relaxed lately," she observed. "Yeah, I had some neighborhood drama that finally got resolved," I told her. "It is nice to not be constantly stressed about what crazy complaint is going to show up next," she laughed. "HOA stuff, the worst HOA president you can imagine, but she is gone now, so life is good." We worked through the morning, breaking for lunch around noon. I sat in the office break room eating a sandwich and scrolling through my phone. There was a message in the Maple Ridge HOA Facebook group from Malcolm announcing that the annual meeting would be held in January. He was asking for input on agenda items and inviting anyone interested in running for the board to submit their name. I considered volunteering for a board position. I had certainly learned a lot about HOA governance through my conflict with Patricia, but I decided against it. I had a demanding job, and serving on the HOA board would take time and energy. Better to let someone else step up, someone who had the bandwidth for it. I would participate as an engaged homeowner and vote in elections, but I did not need to be on the board itself. The afternoon passed quickly, and I drove home through streets lined with snow. The winter sun was already setting at 4:30, casting long shadows across the white landscape. Minnesota winters were harsh, but there was a stark beauty to them that I appreciated. The clean whiteness of fresh snow, the way ice crystals glittered in the sunlight, the quiet that settled over everything when snow muffled sound. I pulled into my driveway, the one I had cleared that morning without incident or complaint. My house looked warm and inviting with the porch light glowing. I went inside, changed into comfortable clothes, and started making dinner. It was a simple evening at home, the kind of peaceful routine that I had been denied during the months of harassment. As I cooked pasta and heated up sauce, I thought about writing down the whole story of what had happened. It was the kind of tale that seemed almost unbelievable. The HOA president so vindictive that she filed a restraining order over snow removal noise, only to have her attorney sanctioned by the judge. It would make a good cautionary tale about the abuse of power in homeowners associations. But mostly, I just wanted to move on. The drama was over, the antagonist was gone, and life had returned to normal. I had learned valuable lessons about standing up for myself and the importance of documentation. I had been reminded that most people are reasonable and will support you when you are in the right. And I had gained a new appreciation for boring, uneventful normalcy. I ate my dinner while watching the news, then spent the evening reading a book I had been meaning to get to for months. It was a thriller about espionage and international intrigue, the kind of high-stakes drama that made my HOA conflict seem almost quaint by comparison. Real people dealing with neighborhood disputes over snow blowers and lawn height, while fictional characters diffused nuclear weapons and uncovered government conspiracies. Both were sources of stress in their own contexts, I supposed. The next morning, I woke up early and went through my usual routine. Coffee, shower, breakfast, checking email and news. There was an email from Thomas Brenner with a subject line that read Carlson payment confirmation. I opened it to find that Deanne Carlson had made the final payment of attorney fees, including interest that had accrued during her delay in paying. The entire matter was now financially settled. I replied with a brief thank you to Thomas for his excellent representation. He had been professional, thorough, and effective throughout the entire process. Having good legal counsel had made all the difference in defending against Patricia's baseless accusations. Work that week was particularly busy with a project deadline approaching. I stayed late several evenings to finish calculations and review designs with my team. The intensity of work was a welcome distraction, keeping my mind fully engaged on technical problems rather than dwelling on past conflicts. Friday evening, I got home after dark and found a card in my mailbox from Robert and his wife Sarah. It was a thank you card for standing up to the HOA madness and making the neighborhood better for everyone. Inside, they had written a heartfelt note about how much they appreciated what I had done and how much more pleasant the community was now. They invited me to dinner the following week. I accepted the invitation, and the next Wednesday I went to their house for a home-cooked meal. Robert and Sarah were wonderful hosts, and we had a great evening talking about everything from work to travel to local politics. The HOA situation came up briefly, but we did not dwell on it. It was old news, a problem solved, water under the bridge. As winter progressed into January and February, the neighborhood settled into a comfortable rhythm. Malcolm handled HOA business efficiently and without drama. The mandatory annual meeting in January was sparsely attended because there were no major controversies to discuss, which was exactly how it should be. Malcolm was re-elected as president unopposed. Jennifer Torres chose not to run again due to work commitments, and a retired accountant named Philip Green was elected as secretary. The board functioned smoothly and without incident. I used my snow blower several more times that winter, always in the early morning when necessary, and never received so much as a sideways glance from anyone. It was remarkable how something that had been a source of enormous conflict had returned to being completely mundane and unremarkable once the unreasonable person was removed from the equation. Spring arrived in late March, and I spent a Saturday afternoon cleaning up my yard and planting some flowers along the front walkway. Marcus from next door was also working in his yard, and we chatted occasionally across the property line. His kids, a boy about 5 and a girl about 3, were playing in their backyard, their laughter carrying on the mild spring air. This was what neighborhood life was supposed to be. Friendly interactions, people taking care of their properties, children playing safely. Not constant enforcement actions and threatened fines over trivial matters. Not vindictive HOA presidents filing restraining orders. Just normal people living their normal lives in a shared community. I finished planting my flowers and stepped back to admire the result. The bright colors looked cheerful against the house, and I felt a sense of satisfaction at having improved my property's appearance. Not because I was afraid of a violation notice, but because I wanted to and because it looked nice. That evening, I sat on my back deck with a beer and watched the sunset. The sky turned brilliant shades of orange and pink, and the air was filled with the sounds of spring. Birds singing, a lawn mower running a few streets over, distant voices of people enjoying the nice weather. It was peaceful and pleasant, the kind of moment you savor. My phone buzzed with a text from my brother asking how things were going. I replied that everything was good, work was busy, the neighborhood was quiet, and life was back to normal. He knew about the HOA situation because I had vented to him during the worst of it, and he was glad to hear it had been resolved. Looking back on the entire saga, from the first text messages from Patricia about my snow blower to the court hearing where the judge sanctioned her attorney to the recall vote that removed her from power, I felt a sense of closure. It had been stressful and frustrating while it was happening, but it had ended as well as I could have hoped. Justice had been served, the bully had been held accountable, and the community had come together to correct the problem. I finished my beer and went inside as the last light faded from the sky. Tomorrow was Sunday, and I planned to sleep in, make a big breakfast, and maybe drive out to one of the state parks for a hike if the weather held. Simple pleasures, the kind that make life enjoyable. The snow blower sat in my garage, waiting for next winter. It was just a tool, an ordinary piece of equipment that thousands of people used without incident. But it had become a symbol of something larger. The right to go about your normal life without harassment, the importance of standing up against unreasonable authority, and the power of community when people unite against injustice. Patricia had seen that snow blower as a violation of her rules, an affront to her authority that needed to be punished. She had escalated and escalated, trying to force compliance, and in doing so had revealed her own unfitness for leadership. The tool that was supposed to be her vehicle for asserting control had instead become the catalyst for her removal. There was poetry in that, I thought, or maybe just irony. Either way, it made for a hell of a story, the kind that would be told and retold at neighborhood gatherings for years to come. Remember when Patricia tried to get a restraining order over snow removal and got destroyed in court? It would become part of the community's lore, a cautionary tale about what happens when power goes to someone's head. But for me, it was no longer a source of stress or anger. It was just something that had happened, a challenge I had faced and overcome. I had learned from it, grown stronger because of it, and moved on. And now, sitting in my comfortable home in my peaceful neighborhood on a pleasant spring evening, I was content. The next morning, I did exactly what I had planned. I slept until 9, made pancakes and bacon for breakfast, and drove out to Lebanon Hills Regional Park for a hike. The trails were beautiful in early spring, with wildflowers starting to bloom and migratory birds returning from the south. I spent 3 hours walking through the woods, breathing fresh air and enjoying the solitude. When I got back home in the afternoon, I decided to wash my car, which had accumulated months of winter grime and road salt. As I was spraying it down in my driveway, Malcolm drove by and stopped to say hello. He rolled down his window. "How's it going, David?" "Really good. Just enjoying the nice weather. How about you?" "Can't complain." "Hey, I wanted to thank you again for everything you did with the Patricia situation. The neighborhood is so much better now." "It was a team effort," I said. "But yeah, things are definitely better. I just got an email from the management company we use for document storage. Apparently, Patricia requested copies of a bunch of old HOA records. I think she might be looking for ammunition to cause trouble somehow." I felt a brief flicker of concern, then pushed it away. Let her try. Everything was handled by the book. The recall was legitimate. The court case is settled. "There is nothing she can do." Malcolm nodded. "That's what I figured. Just wanted to give you a heads up in case she tries anything." "I appreciate it, but I am not worried. We have documentation of everything, and she has already proven in court that she is willing to lie. No one is going to take her seriously." We talked for a few more minutes about upcoming HOA business, then Malcolm drove off. I finished washing my car, more determined than ever not to let Patricia occupy space in my mind. She was gone, she had lost, and any attempt at revenge would only make her look worse. The weeks turned into months, and nothing came of Malcolm's warning. Patricia apparently had requested the records but had not done anything with them. Maybe she had realized that she had no case. Maybe her attorney, whoever she had hired after Carlson, had advised her to let it go. Or maybe she was just too busy with her new life to keep fighting old battles. Summer arrived, and with it came long evenings and weekend barbecues. The neighborhood hosted a block party in July that drew nearly the entire community. Kids ran through sprinklers while adults stood around grills and coolers, talking and laughing. Malcolm gave a brief speech thanking everyone for being part of such a great community, and there was genuine warmth and camaraderie in the air. I stood with Robert and Steve Morrison, drinking beer and talking about sports and vacation plans. At one point, Robert raised his bottle in a toast to no more crazy HOA drama. We all clinked bottles and drank to that. It was a sentiment everyone could get behind. As the sun set and the party wound down, I walked back to my house feeling grateful for where I lived and who I lived among. These were good people, reasonable people, the kind of neighbors anyone would want. The dark period under Patricia's leadership had been an aberration, a temporary dysfunction that had been corrected. I went to bed that night feeling deeply content with my life. Good job, good home, good neighborhood. The basics were all solid and everything else was just details. The months continued to pass without incident. Fall brought brilliant foliage as the trees turned red and gold. I spent weekends raking leaves and preparing my house for winter. Halloween came and went, with the neighborhood kids trick or treating in cheerful safety. Thanksgiving arrived, and I hosted my parents and brother for dinner, cooking a turkey and all the traditional sides. When the first snow of the season fell in late November, I watched it from my kitchen window with my coffee, thinking back to the previous winter and everything that had transpired. It seemed like ancient history now, something from another era of my life. The person I was now felt stronger and wiser than the person who had first received those angry text messages from Patricia. I cleared that first snow without incident, and all the snow that followed throughout the winter. My snow blower ran reliably, doing the job it was designed to do, unremarkable and uncontroversial. Life was exactly as it should be, peaceful and predictable in the best way. Years passed. Malcolm served as HOA president for 3 terms before stepping down and being replaced by Philip Green, who was equally competent and reasonable. I continued working at my engineering firm, eventually getting promoted to senior engineer with a team working under me. The neighborhood remained stable and pleasant, property values held steady, and there were no major conflicts or controversies. I occasionally wondered what had happened to Patricia Hendricks. Had she learned anything from her experience? Had she found whatever she was looking for when she moved to that condo in Eden Prairie? Was she making some other community miserable with her need for control, or had she mellowed with age and perspective? I would never know, and it did not really matter. What mattered was that I had stood up for myself when it counted. I had not backed down in the face of intimidation and false accusations. I had documented everything, fought back strategically, and prevailed. Those were the lessons I carried forward, applicable to any conflict in any context. The snow blower that started it all eventually wore out after many years of faithful service. I replaced it with a newer model, same brand, slightly more powerful. The first time I used the new one, I smiled thinking about how much drama the old one had inadvertently caused. This one would hopefully have a quieter existence, just a tool doing a job without becoming a symbol of anything larger. Standing in my driveway on a cold winter morning, clearing fresh snow while the sun rose over the Minnesota landscape, I felt at peace. The past was the past, full of lessons learned and challenges overcome. The present was good, stable, and satisfying. The future was open, full of possibilities. I finished clearing the snow, put away the snow blower, and went inside to start my day. Just another normal morning in a normal neighborhood, exactly as it should be. And I could not have asked for anything better than that.